don't you love it at this time of the season when Nairobi is painted purple? That was rather live images of Kenyatta Avenue in case you're planning to leave the house any moment now. This is our Twitter poll question because it's going to set the basis of this conversation for those who are just joining us. Do you think Kenya can do without the loans from China? Do you think Kenya can do without the loans from China? All right, let me just sample one or two. Bell, you say yes. What if we manage all our revenues from all our sources and court fines? Kenya is heading into slavery. One more. Samuel, you say yes, we can do without the loans because loans from China do not reduce the economic burden we're experiencing, but deepen them further by putting us in an extra cost of repaying loans through taxing people. More infrastructure investment doesn't create income, but depends on others. All right, in case you are just joining us, let me reintroduce my panel. Sitting closer to me, I have Mark Bichachi. He's a political analyst. At the center, James Mamboleo, an advocate. On my far left, I have Honorable Joe Mutambo, former member of parliament for Mwingi Central. And that Twitter poll question truly sets the basis of our conversation. But let me take it a bit further, just to give you an overall view. The public debt that we have here in Kenya, as of June 2018, we stand at about 5.1 trillion Kenyan shillings. By June 2019, 5.1 would have gotten to 5.6 trillion Kenyan shillings. By 2022, Kenya will be in debt of about 7 trillion Kenyan shillings. But where are we getting this money from? These are our external lenders. China, number one, 559.1 billion Kenyan shillings. Italy, 101.9 billion Kenyan shillings. Germany, 34.7 billion Kenyan shillings. Belgium, 10.2 billion Kenyan shillings. And lastly, US with 2.9 billion Kenyan shillings. The reason why this conversation is so important for us to be having it now is because even one of you has said it in a comment. This is economic slavery. Let's give an overall view of the African continent. Sierra Leone recently refused 400 million loan from China to build their airport. Instead, they said they'll work with what we have and sort of revamp it. Zambia has become a classic example of economic slavery, and God forbid, where Kenya could be going to. Here's an overall view. Zambia owns China $8.7 billion US dollars, and this is how they've infiltrated them. Well, right now, Chinese police have been appointed in Zambia, all right? And the Times of Zambia, the local newspaper, is now being written in Mandarin. So you also have China owning 60% of the National Broadcasting Corporation. China has now taken hold of the mouthpiece. That's the media. China is also in terms of there with their police appointments. And those numbers are the ones that I was earlier stating. But let me also bring your attention to what some of our leaders have said in regards to this. A comment by Member of Parliament for Kiharu Dindi Nyoro. This is what he had to say.
Kwamba siku hizi tunaona hata mchaina anachoma mahidi huku Nairobi. This is not a laughing matter because mimi kama kijana mbunge kijana naulizwa maswali mingi sana na vijana. Kazi muna create, hizo kazi ziko wapi? The kind of economy we have, a low economy, we cannot afford to share the few jobs that we have with foreigners. Na mimi nataka kusema hivi, kama kijana, kama mwanabiashara na kama mbunge, tunataka the government agencies watuambie kama wameshindwa kufurusha hawa watu ambao wanafanya biashara ile inafaa kufanywa na Mkenya wa kawaida.
All right, let me begin with Mamboleo. What are your thoughts on that?
It would be very interesting to see what happens when we appoint Chinese policemen in Kenya, because otherwise they might be the ones that can deal with the menace that has become the Chinese in this country. However, this is what I want to say. The truth of the matter is, Zinzi, that all the debt that we owe to other countries is not only to China. 500 billion out of 5-point-something trillion is really not too much. The only thing is probably that is the leading country that has lent to us. Now, this is what I must state. Your important question today was, can we live without debt? The answer is absolutely no. This country cannot live without debt where it's reached. And indeed, there is no country across the world right now that is living without debt, including the United States, which is the biggest borrower from China as we speak. Can we use our revenues better? I think yes, all right? However, we must be a bit more enthusiastic about the processes of running government than we are. Now, this is the truth of the matter, that this government has many things that it needs to deliver to Kenyans, including delivering on infrastructural and development programs. However, the amount of money that we raise as Kenyans is not going to be able to do these things. Remember that out of statistics that are now very well known, out of 45 million Kenyan shillings plus, it's only about 2.5 million who pay taxes. Okay? And most of these who pay taxes are mostly people in formal employment, employees, because the taxes are paid at source. Now, if you look at most of the other people in the country, the people who use the development, that, for instance, infrastructure, roads, and so on, friends of mine, rich friends like Joe Mutambu here, they do not pay taxes. They avoid or evade taxes in most of the cases. The result being that ultimately we are not able to raise the amount of taxes or revenue that we need to run a government. Now, after the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, we have introduced a system of government in which we have two tiers, national level and the county level. We have a raise of the number of MPs from 210 to 300 plus, okay? We have two houses of parliament. We have a Senate, we have a National Assembly, we now have the Supreme Court, we have several commissions, we have county governments, 47 of them, and so on and so forth. Money has to be raised to run these programs. If we have to achieve devolution, you keep hearing governors saying they need more money to the counties. So this is the, from where I sit, this is the important thing that Kenyans must know. That in as far as debt is a bad thing, in this country now we are not going to do without them. However, we need to expand, and I hope that the KRA is listening. We need to expand the tax base to reach people who otherwise do not pay taxes. We need to collect as much money as we can, and then for the executive arm of government, including the Kenyan Treasury, we need to make sure that this money is used for the right things, and it is used for those things that we only say it be used for. But most importantly, corruption.
All right.
Government officials should stop seeing government positions as a place where they go to make money.
Hopefully one day that will happen. Gentlemen, before I get your thoughts, let me show you what Senator Johnson Sakaja had to say earlier this week at the Senate proceedings on this same issue of how we should be protecting our small traders. Take a listen.
The traders and importers in Nairobi are still going through a lot of hard times, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this market has been infiltrated, first of all, by the Chinese, and I will say it. I know I should not mention friendly countries, but they're competing even with our hawkers, Mr. Speaker. They have their go-downs, which they're opening at 3 a.m., and they have front people to provide goods at lower prices. Mr. Speaker, many of the goods and the fight against counterfeit is not the fight against our people. It's a fight against goods that can actually harm the environment and the health of people. That should not be a fight against people. But you find these implementers, or can I say anti-counterfeit officers, confiscating goods and selling these goods in shops just down the road from these traders. Mr. Speaker, this has to stop. And I'm glad that even yesterday the President noted, and he was even too embarrassed to read his speech, because the SME sector, the small traders and small businessmen, just because they may not be wearing suits and ties and don't come to the table like KEPSA and Kenya Association of Manufacturers, are really ignored despite the fact that they produce close to 80% of the GDP when it comes to trade, Mr. Speaker. We need to treat them better. We need to be able to provide better subsidies for what they produce. We need to make sure that we implement a Buy Kenya policy to ensure that even these people who are manufacturing, manufacturers are not just the big people in the industrial area. Some of the best furniture you will get, Mr. Speaker, is along Gikomba or along Gong Road, Mr. Speaker. We need to find a way in which to build these people.
All right, so that's Johnson Sakaja, Senator to Nairobi. Bichachi, your thoughts on what he said, protecting small traders. And then at some point we were singing Buy Kenya, Grow Kenya. I think that song just died out.
Well, the song died out because as Kenyans we don't take ourselves quite seriously as a nation. First, let me deal with the question of debt. The question of debt is an interesting question because debt is an okay thing until you apply it in the uniquely African and therefore Kenyan situation. The reason why Africa in general has embraced Chinese debt is because the Chinese will invest in whatever it is you want without due regard to whether it's corrupt, to whether you employ ethical values in your country. And that's a big difference between borrowing from the West and from the Chinese. But in return, what the Chinese do is they flood your market not only with cheap products, but they also flood your market with cheap Chinese people. Very key word, cheap Chinese people. They bring you the Chinese people who will call you monkeys to your face in your own country. They bring you Chinese people who will roast maize in competition with Mama Mboga in your own country. They bring you Chinese people who are willing to be hawkers. They'll bring you Chinese people who want to be tour guides of your own country. It is like me going to Mutambo's bedroom and telling him where his bed is better than himself. This is what we purport to do in Africa, where how can a Chinese person come to Africa to tell us where our hills and our mountains are? But the reason for that is simple, that it is almost as if in Africa, and I've traveled to many African countries, that what happens is together with the Chinese road, you get Chinese people coming into your country, not to bring in expertise, but to begin to compete with your own local population on a very unfair scale.
Do you think we'll get to the point of Sri Lanka, no, not Sri Lanka rather, but with Zambia?
The point of Zambia we might not get to, and the reason we might not get to it is because of the population. But we might get to it if we continue, if our leaders continue to do what they do. I wrote an article and I said it was shameful for a nation such as Kenya, for our CS of transport, to launch a tunnel upon which all the writings on the tunnel were in Chinese. To this day, I don't know the name of that tunnel because the writing was in Chinese. I'm assuming it must be some sufuria clanging, saying ling ping ting ping pong pong. You know, that is how it is named, because that is what was written there. So we need to fix those things. Our leaders, look at the building in town, the Parliament building, then branding on that building as it's being built is in Chinese. So we are slowly being assimilated into Chinese culture. So we need to watch out. But the worst part is this, that because of our corruption, and this is the problem with this country, and I'll tie it into the Wario story, the reason why Kenyans should be upset is in this country, after we steal your money, what we do is we make sure our wives and children the next day are on Instagram wearing the uniforms of our runners. That is what happens in this country. That we take money from the public and then we showcase it to our faces that we've misused it, misspent it, and done the wrong thing with it.
Honorable Mutambo, I'll ask you the exact same question we're asking our audience today. Do you think, and having been a member of parliament, do you think that Kenya can honestly do without loans from China?
I'll paraphrase that question. Can we manage debts in Kenya? That's a simple thing. Can we manage debts? And the answer is no, we cannot manage the debts. To live with or without debt, debts are all over. And to borrow is not a bad thing, like a lawyer has said. But the problem is we are borrowing in a wrong manner. Number two, I would say that, and I want Kenyans to hear me, we do not need investors in this country. We need innovators in this country. If you get people can do or invest more in innovation in this country, will do better. And I know that can be done. We said it the other time I was seated here. But let me come back now to your question and address it in a proper manner. The reason why we are borrowing, it is because we are not managing our resources. And we are dwelling so much on how much we are borrowing. We are dwelling so much on too much, I mean, we're spending too much time on how much the church is stole in NYS, which is only 1 billion shillings, and we are not asking ourselves, how much are we losing on the other end? What am I saying? I would want Kenyans to be told on a day brought light, why did we sell 40% of Safaricom shares? Every year, one thing you need to understand, and this is a shocker, Safaricom announces 50 billions profit. 40% of that is 25 billion. It goes to our colonial masters. Why did we sell those shares? And how much did those who, and I'm saying this with a lot of respect to intellectual, property rights. How much did they invest? You want to tell me up to today they have not recouped their money? Every year we are giving more than 25 billion, and I'm saying it, billion, out money from your pocket, money from my pocket.
So,
why do we do it? Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves.
You know,
why are we borrowing to build railway while we have our Kenya Railway with a lot of stuff lying down there? These are the questions.
Honorable Mutombo, you said a very important point as well, that innovation can be the solution, right? Solutions from right here in Kenya. But those innovations are coming from young people. Young people right now who are being choked by the economy. You can't even start a business right now with all these taxes and how hard it is even just to get permits. Yet President Kenyatta will come and tell you, think outside the box.
Can I tell you something else? I sat in Parliament and I was privileged to read the budget. The amount of money we pump into research is enough to make the youth in this country start their own businesses. The answer is we do not go for it, and we do not have right leaders to guide us and to show us the way. So see what happened just the other day? My good friend, my lovely president, looking at the what do you call it? The statement, and he's going through and he's saying, oh shit, what is this? He's like waking up from asleep and saying, you guys, what do you want me to tell Kenyans? Because what is on this paper is not the reality of our country.
Very true.
And I want to thank President for throwing that statement away. Because he's being misled. The person who was in that state was writing a statement for Mr. Uhuru to lie to Kenyans. And if the direction President Uhuru took is going to continue, you are going to see changes. Because the people who are misleading him and who are misleading our leaders are going to change.
Let me get the thoughts of Mamboleo, and even as I get your thoughts, because we need to move on to education, given that exams are coming up, gentlemen. Perhaps the fact that a lot of what is happening right now, and we know it even on the ground, Bichachi has said it as well, a lot of these Chinese come here in Kenya as tourists, they get staying permits, and what happens is that they start to sell Gikomba clothes next to our small traders. They start to sell to you Mahindi Choma, Smoky Kachumbari, next to the guy everyone knows in the estate. That's when you know this is too much. This is when you know their culture is being infiltrated into our own culture here in Kenya. And if you do that in China as a black man or as a Kenyan, what sort of experience do you think you will get? Yet we in Kenya, as Kenyans, we're being so tolerant to this extent where you go to Gikomba and you'll buy clothes from a Chinese, Mamboleo.
You can't do it in China. It's not going to happen. They will throw you out immediately. Let me tell you something. The China-Kenya relations is something that this government needs to look at and evaluate very closely with one simple intention in mind, to make sure that you have a close-by date, let's say 2025, upon which you are going to disengage and tell all Chinese here that your time is up, fellows, now pack up and go. But this is the thing. There is a law on immigration. There are laws in relation to work permits and licenses. Those laws are simply not being implemented. They are not being enforced. The Department of Immigration, rather than preventing these Chinese from coming to this country, use that law to do business. How? They take money from these Chinese to grant them the licenses, to grant them permits for expatriate work, which we can source locally. The law on expatriates says that you are not allowed to bring in expatriates to do a job that Kenyans can do, all right? But what are we doing? We are giving jobs to Chinese which our countrymen can do, including very simple jobs. Now, one of these fine days, you'll get to town and the shoe shiner will be Chinese.
I won't be surprised.
Everything will be Chinese. It is extremely annoying, and I think this government needs to be listening. But most importantly, Zinzi, we need to look Uhuru in the face and tell him that you need to do something about the top composition of your leadership. There is something that we call cabinet. There are people sitting in your government calling themselves cabinet secretaries. There are people sitting in your government calling themselves principal secretaries. Then there are people sitting in your government calling themselves chief administrative secretaries. Mr. President, these are people you should have sent packing like yesterday. Most of them are not going to lead this country anywhere. And then when you start there, Then you overhaul what we call state agencies, including commissions and state corporations, because none of them is working, all right? And people in this country have waited for too long for you to take action, because most of this rhetoric is not going to wash it.
All right, Bichachi, your thoughts on the small traders?
First and foremost, the moment there is someone who's trading in this country and doing a job or a business that is not so vital that it can only be done by an expatriate, then every CS, every policeman, every city council official who is allowed that to happen should be talking to us from behind bars. That is what we need to do in this country. The action that needs to be taken by the president has been stated so clearly by Mamboleo, that if we do not take drastic action, then disaster is what awaits us. Because, let me tell you, I lived in South Africa when Zimbabweans came and did the work South Africans could do. I lived in South Africa when Nigerians came and did the work South Africans could do. A few years ago, you saw the people of South Africa raise up and begin to kill their own black countrymen, to kick them out. Why? Because you cannot starve your child for the cousin who's come to visit you. It cannot happen. The priority must always be the children of this soil need to be fed first. The priority must always be the carpenter of this soil needs to have his furniture bought first. Unless that policy is implemented, and I am warning Kenyans, I have seen the anger and vitriol Kenyans have against the Chinese who live on the ground floor of your building, 20 of them doing the jobs you could do. I have seen that anger. And if the government does not act, we will see blood on the streets, and we need to act fast.
All right, Muthamba, I would love for you to have the last say. Gentlemen, keeping in mind that I think in November, President Uhuru Kenyatta is going to China again for the Expo Summit. Why would our politicians go down this road?
I think it's selfishness. And I would love the day I'll see somebody coming up with the ideas and saying, instead of us borrowing, I would want us to do this. You know, it doesn't matter how much we speak. We may speak loud, but we are not giving solutions. I'm waiting for the day when I'll see either a politician or a technocrat or an engineer coming up and saying, I have come up with this innovation to improve the lives of Kenyans. The problem is, we speak, we say we do not want Chinese, yes. But is there anybody who is saying, I have an alternative, I can do better than Chinese? Let people speak out. I'm saying this with something in mind, that very soon you'll see me showcasing what can be done in the country in one sector. Which sector I'm not saying now, is too early. But I would wish Kenyans can come up. We do some showcasing in showgrounds and all those kind of things. But do we take whatever we do there seriously, or do we move it a notch higher? After the president passes and he has seen what you have done, you dismantle and you go home. We have seen so many people showcasing what they can do in our country in the showgrounds, but only for the television. After that, do we see anything else? What we are seeing is money being spent in a wrong way, in wrong places. We have seen so much wasted in Galana Gulalu project. What has come out of it? We have spent billions.
White smoke elephant projects.
Everything in this country turns out to be a white elephant. I think the moment will